Ever heard of the unsung heroes of the Age of Discovery? We all know Columbus, but what about the skilled navigators who actually made those legendary voyages possible? Today, we read diving deep into the incredible life of one of the most important yet overlooked figures of that era, Pedro Alonso Niño. This isn't just a story about sailing. It's a tale of skill, ambition, and the complex legacy of exploration. Pedro Alonso Niño, often called El Negro due to his African heritage, was born around 1468 in the town of Moguer, Spain. Now, Moguer wasn't just any town. It was a bustling port, a hub of maritime activity. Imagine growing up surrounded by the sounds of the shipyard, the smell of salt and tar, and the stories of sailors returning from distant lands. For a young man like Pedro, the sea wasn't just a career path. It was in his blood. His family, the Niño family, were renowned mariners. They owned their own ship, the Caravel La Niña. From a young age, Pedro learned the ropes, quite literally. He became an expert pilot, a master of navigation. In the 15th century, this was no easy feat. There was no GPS, no satellites. A pilot had to read the stars, understand the winds and currents, and have an almost sixth sense for the ocean. Pedro Alonso Niño had all of that and more. He was one of the best. So when a certain Genoese explorer named Christopher Columbus came to the nearby port of Palos with a radical idea to sail west to reach the east, who do you think he needed? He needed the best sailors, the best ships, and the best pilots. And the Niño family was at the top of that list. It was a huge risk. Columbus's plan was controversial, and many thought it was a suicide mission. But the Niño brothers Juan, Francisco, and our man Pedro saw an opportunity. They not only supported Columbus, but also used their influence to rally other skeptical sailors from the region. And crucially, they provided their own ship, La Niña. In August 1492, history was made. 3 ships set sail, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and La Niña. Pedro Alonso Niño was officially the pilot, the chief navigator of the Santa Maria, Columbus's flagship. This was a position of immense trust and responsibility. He was the man Columbus relied on to guide them across the vast, unknown Atlantic. Think about the pressure. For weeks, they saw nothing but an endless expanse of water. The crew was on edge, close to mutiny. But skilled navigators like Pedro kept them on course, interpreting every sign, from the flight of birds to the direction of the seaweed. His expertise was a critical factor in the fleet's survival and eventual success. When the Santa Maria tragically ran aground off the coast of Hispaniola on Christmas Day, Columbus had to think fast. He transferred his command to the smaller, more agile La Niña. And who was there, ready to take the helm? The Niño family, including Pedro. Pedro Alonso Niño then piloted La Niña for the rest of this historic first voyage, including the treacherous journey back to Spain. He was instrumental in ensuring that news of the New World reached Europe. You'd think that would be enough for one lifetime, right? But Pedro was just getting started. He returned to the Americas with Columbus on his second voyage in 1493. This was a much larger expedition, a fleet of 17 ships aimed at colonization. Once again, Pedro's skills as a pilot were indispensable as they explored more islands in the Caribbean, including Jamaica and the southern coast of Cuba. After his first 2 voyages with Columbus, Pedro's reputation was solidified. He was one of the most experienced pilots of the Indies. But like many who participated in these early expeditions, he felt he hadn't received the financial rewards he deserved. The promise of riches from the New World was proving elusive for the common sailor, even for the highly skilled ones. So, in 1499, Pedro decided to take matters into his own hands. This is where his story takes a fascinating turn. He partnered with a merchant named Cristobal Guerra to lead his own expedition. This was part of a series of journeys known as the Andalusian voyages, where the Spanish crown allowed private individuals to explore and trade as long as they gave the crown its 20% cut. Niño and Guerra set sail with a single small caravel of just 50 tons. Their goal was clear: trade. They weren't looking for glory or new continents. They were looking for profit. They headed for the Pearl Coast, an area along the coast of modern-day Venezuela that Columbus had briefly visited on his third voyage and noted for its abundance of pearls. And what they found was beyond their wildest dreams. They reached the Gulf of Paria and the islands of Margarita and Cabagua. There, they engaged in trade with the local indigenous people. Using cheap trinkets, bells, and beads, they acquired a massive quantity of high-quality pearls. It's said they collected over 150 pounds of pearls, a staggering fortune at the time. Their voyage was, from a commercial standpoint, a spectacular success. They had achieved in a few short months what Columbus had failed to do in years. They brought back tangible, incredible wealth from the New World. However, their triumphant return to Spain in early 1500 hit a major snag. In their haste to secure their treasure, they had tried to bypass the royal authorities in their home port to avoid paying the quinto real, the royal fifth, that 20% tax owed to the crown. This was a big mistake. Word got out, and Pedro Alonso Niño was arrested. He was accused of defrauding the crown. All his hard-won pearls were confiscated, and he was thrown in prison. He spent a considerable time fighting the charges. He argued that he had intended to pay the tax, but had simply made a procedural error. The legal battle dragged on. While he was eventually acquitted and released, the entire ordeal was a bitter blow. He had risked everything, succeeded brilliantly, and then lost it all to bureaucracy and suspicion. It is a stark reminder of the complex politics and intense competition that surrounded the riches of the Americas. Despite this setback, Pedro Alonso Niño's spirit wasn't broken. He continued his career as a master pilot. He participated in other voyages, and his knowledge of the Caribbean sea routes remained highly sought after. His life story is a microcosm of the era, a blend of incredible skill, daring ambition, immense success, and crushing disappointment. So why isn't he a household name? History is often simplified, and the narrative tends to focus on the leader, the visionary like Columbus. But history is made by many hands. It's made by the engineers, the soldiers, the financiers, and, in this case, the pilots. Pedro Alonso Niño was more than just a sailor. He was a master of his craft, a pioneer in his own right, and a black man who rose to the highest echelons of a profession that was defining the New World Order. His story challenges us to look beyond the great men of history and appreciate the contributions of the experts who made their achievements possible. He navigated the ships, he found the trade routes, he brought back the treasure. Pedro Alonso Niño wasn't just along for the ride. He was one of the people charting the course. His legacy is etched into every map of the early Americas and carried in the currents of the Atlantic he knew so well. Next time you hear the story of 1492, remember the name Pedro Alonso Niño, the master pilot from Mogar, the man who guided Columbus, and a true hero of the Age of Discovery. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next dive into the hidden corners of history. See you next time.